lunch break. So I will kick off to welcome you all today to our to the first episode of our new webinar series, Achieving Resilient Communities. Apologies, sorry, just letting someone in there go to talk. Reimagining Sustainable Development and Achieving Resilient Communities. So the title is a little bit involved, so I thought what I'd do is start off by talking to you guys about what that means for us at Engineers Without Borders. And people are coming in thick and fast now. So yeah, just to chat to you guys about what that means for us. So for us, reimagining sustainable development is really about critically examining and questioning the kind of development we've had to date and where that's brought us, but also really importantly about getting creative and about bringing some ambition and vision and imagination about the kind of new and different realities and futures we want to create together. And resilient communities for us aren't just about, sorry, just going to let a few people in there, guys, sorry. And resilient communities for us aren't just about communities that have resilient infrastructure and technology. They're about communities founded on empathy, on solidarity, and about a commitment to creating a dignified life for all. I was on a webinar earlier this year. Liam, I might just ask, maybe as I'm chatting, would you be able to let the guys in there if that would be?
As we
brilliant.
Speak.
Okay, excellent. I'm going to stop doing that then. This is a showcase of the challenges of multitasking, guys. But yeah, so coming back to it, thanks, Liam. Cheers. So as I say, I was on a webinar earlier this year in the summer with Mike Ryan. I think we all know now from the World Health Organization through the pandemic. And he made the comment, we're very good at technology, we're not so good at solidarity and sharing. It's just a very basic observation, but I think it's a really key question and challenge for our times of how can we create a sense of local and global solidarity to bring about the shift in mindset and behavior and action that we so desperately need. And he went on, Mike, to talk about the Sustainable Development Goals, the ubiquitous SDGs. And he made the very insightful remark that it's no longer about development and trying to keep developing for forever. It's about survival. So how can we all survive on this planet in the 21st century and beyond? How can we strive towards creating more dignified lives for everyone? And how, really importantly, can we work together in communities to forge relationships with each other that can be the basis for empathy with each other and the basis for mutual understanding and respect? So these are questions that we hope to explore in our webinar series and together with our hosts and with yourselves. We'd love to hear your thoughts and perspectives. Indeed, we're doing these webinars to hear from you guys. So really looking forward to having those conversations with you. But as I say, I'm joined today by Liam, who's the Director of EWB and Lecturer at TU Dublin. And Liam's going to be picking up the thread of exploring the Sustainable Development Goals and looking at whether they're really fit for purpose. Can they enable us to survive on our planet? So Liam, I'll pass over to you now. And thanks so much for joining, guys. Really hope you enjoy the webinar today and you can join us as well for the remainder of our series. Liam, over to you.
Thanks, Emma. Just check you can hear and see me okay, yeah?
Yeah, all good.
So good afternoon all. Emma introduced a nice light topic for Wednesday afternoon lunchtime with your coffee and biscuit. First of all, who am I? Well, for those of you who don't know me, I'm a chartered civil engineer. Started off life quite happily working on major projects around Ireland. And then something happened in 2004. Well, two things happened. I got married, but that wasn't the momentous thing that happened. On the far side of the world, there was a Southeast Asian tsunami. Fast forward 6 months, we'd left Ireland, sold everything, and it was the Irish Red Cross reconstruction manager in Southeast Asia. And that began a kind of, some would say, downward spiral into international development. And I kind of come full circle now. I lecture in TU Dublin, and as Emma said, I'm one of the directors, along with Declan and Elaine, of EWB Ireland. And the question then is, who are EWB Ireland? That's not one of our projects, incidentally, I'd like to say. Well, we're a registered charity, and we're basically about bridging the gap between academia, communities, professionals, in effect, creating a network of global engineers, architects, scientists. You can check us out on our website, and we're hoping to generate some membership, because really, as Emma said, any organization is really about its members. It's about a dynamic discussion. So that's hopefully what we'll kick off today. The context of this webinar series is this generation has faced unprecedented challenges with the uncertainties of climate change, with the challenges of living in a 410 world, 4 degrees warming, 10 billion people, with the challenges of urbanization. 2018, 1 in 8 people globally live in slums. 2050, it's projected to be 1 in 2 people. And we don't have to go too far outside our own country to see the massive challenge of homelessness right across our cities. And of course, living in the current and most definitely future global pandemics. But all of these challenges are big global issues, but the solutions are local. But here's the thing. We can't solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them. We need to think, act, and interact differently if we have a chance. So this webinar series is really about engaging that discussion. So you're going to hear from some really interesting speakers over the next couple of weeks. Everything from cycling lanes in Guatemala to how EWB Australia focus their innovation challenges, right through to community-led housing in Dublin. So the purpose is to engage, inform, annoy, something my wife says I'm quite good at, but share experiences, and more importantly, challenge the norm, rethink, engage, and with the greatest respect to economists maybe tuning in, I'm sick of turning on the TV and hearing economists leading the debate. Let's get engineers and architects to the forefront. So with that in mind, let me upset a few other people. Engineers, like I said, I'm a chartered civil engineer. We think linearly. That's how we're trained. That's how we solve problems. We design based on past performance, and we try to remove as much risk as possible. So I think the first thing we need to do is we need to reimagine education. And whenever I do workshops with EWB, I start with, don't think like an engineer or architect. Because I think what we need to do is produce a generation of global graduates who can think sideways, who have the ability to invent, to innovate, not to copy, replicate, or play it safe. And of course, all this is underpinned by the Sustainable Development Goals that set the global sustainable development agenda through to 2030. Just a quick aside showing maybe some of you will be involved in this where there is no engineer, some of you may not. So how EWB try to reimagine engineering education is we work with our Where There Is No Engineer Community Resilience Design Program. And this is all about bringing the world into the classroom. And we work with development partners, different development partners each year. And we explore the relationship between people, technology, and environment in very real life challenges. This year, delighted, we have 2 development partners. We have Zamda Ireland, who run a school in Kabwe in Zambia. And we also have the great EWB Toilet Love Story, if you're involved in it, you'll understand, with an Indian partner based in some villages in Tamil Nadu. And the end of this program, which happens over 6 weeks, 12 weeks, or longer, depending on your college, is we bring the classroom back to the world. So there's a series of national finals, and the best projects pre-COVID then actually go to work with the communities to try to implement their design solutions. The picture you're seeing on screen there is a biochar kiln from our winners in 2016. They were product designers from TU Dublin. Delighted to say that's actually recently we had some global giving funding. So thanks to everyone if you contribute to the project. And we're currently working with Field Ready in Kathmandu through their Fab Lab to create a social enterprise to work with also a local organization called Sanskriti Farms to bring this solution to local farmers in Nepal. So it's a perfect example of bringing the classroom to the world. Picture on the bottom right, also we had a partnership with ActionAid, again in Nepal. And what you see there is a social enterprise with some women's groups who were focusing on bringing the winning design that year, which was a design called Tide, which was exploring sanitary pads. So there is a network now, or a movement, as I like to call it, an underground movement of sustainable education right across from north to south, east to west, It works differently in different colleges, some integrated into their modules, some run it external, and some run it through the local EWB branch. So I mentioned underpinning all of this are these elusive SDGs. So 2 simple questions for your Wednesday lunchtime. Are the SDGs a valid measure of sustainability? Well, let's tease that first one out. And to answer that, we kind of need to go back to, well, what is sustainable development? And even then, I guess, do we need to ask, what is sustainable development in 2021? Well, I think it's pretty widely known that back in '87 was kind of the first definition, which was meeting the needs of the present generation without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. So this concept of intergenerational, that what we do now won't affect future generations. There's also then the possibility that human and other forms of life on Earth will flourish forever, which brings together the fact that humans and other species and biodiversity need to live in harmony. And the one that I kind of find easiest in my day-to-day work is enough for all forever. And then into this then, imagine a set of goals that every country in the world could aspire to meet, where everyone could expect to meet their basic needs, while using resources at a level that would be sustainable, even if every other country in the world did the same. Well, ladies and gentlemen, the SDGs, 17 goals, 169 targets, 248 indicators. What could possibly go wrong? Well, for us, the SDGs apply to countries, apply to individuals, apply to businesses. Most of you, I'm sure all of you will be involved in different programs in your organizations implementing SDGs. For EWB, we interpret them very simply as development without borders. And just to go back, what did the experts think when this all started? Those of you, incidentally, unfamiliar with the 2 social commentators, Stadler and Waldorf, and I appreciate some will be, I've embedded the YouTube link to check out after this webinar. But edition of The Economist, March 26, 2015, when the SDGs were first published. And a bit harsh, I think, but Moses brought 10 commandments down from Mount Sinai. If only the UN's proposed list of sustainable development goals were concise. The SDGs are supposed to set out how to improve the lives of the poor and emerging countries, how to steer money and government policy towards areas where they can do the most good. But the efforts of the SDG drafting committees are so sprawling and misconceived that the entire enterprise is being set up to fail. Okay, doesn't pull any punches, a bit harsh. Bill Easterly, who I think has probably written the definitive book on international development called The White Man's Burden, he was equally scathing. In September of that year, he said the SDGs should stand for senseless, dreamy, and garbled. Only the UN could come up with a document so worthless. So I'm not going to get into a criticism of the SDGs, but some of the challenges and the thought process early on was, well, you know, is it a goal if it's unattainable? A lot of challenges and debate about how to measure progress towards the SDGs. And in fact, it's taken a long time even to agree measurements of certain targets. And then, and this is probably central to our discussion today, this mutual exclusivity potentially of growth and how economies are based with actually achieving the SDGs. And then just to finish that discussion off, there was an open letter written to the UN by some serious thinkers and social commentators and climate change leaders, and they kind of summed it up at the time, 2015. They pointed out this contradiction of growth inherent in the SDGs and the link between growth and resource use. And again, the fact that growth doesn't necessarily reduce poverty. Again, we don't have to go far to figure that out. And they also identified big drivers of poverty in this global agenda were left unaddressed in terms of issues of debt and then measurements. So there was a lot of debate, but they exist. They're here, they're embedded. So the question we now ask, are the SDGs really a blueprint for this sustainable development agenda? In other words, to meet the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Because that's what sustainable development goals should be about. Well, here's a question. And if we were in person, we might ask this: what is the most sustainable country in the world? Well, I can actually answer that, and I can answer it definitively because I can go to the SDG rankings as of, I think, August 21. The most sustainable country in the world is Finland. Why? Because it ranks top of the SDG index, closely followed by Sweden and Denmark, and then a small gap to Germany, Belgium, Austria, Norway. Ireland, incidentally, are number 13. And you start to see a bit of a trend. Well, a couple of things. First, mostly European countries, a lot of Northern European countries, maybe not to be unexpected. And you can go into any of these then, and you can download a report card. So the school report card, and you can have a look, and it's a little bit of a busy slide, but you can glance. Basically, green is good. Green means we've achieved that particular SDG. Orange or red means we're on our way. Sorry, orange means we're on our way, and red means we haven't achieved it. And you can see, again, particularly in some of the Nordic countries who have very good social structures, they've achieved the SDGs in terms of basic infrastructure. They're well on their way in several, only 2 reds, 12 and 13. Responsible consumption and production and climate action, 2 out of 17. It's not bad. Again, maybe to be expected. Let's go to the bottom then. Let's switch tack. And kind of in the bottom 10% of countries, again, you start to see a wee bit of a trend. A lot of sub-Saharan countries. Again, not to be unexpected, maybe. Let's just zone in on Sierra Leone for no other reason than the fact I lived there and worked there for several years. And what does a report card for a low-income country like Sierra Leone look like? Well, again, maybe not unexpectedly, a lot of reds. A country like Sierra Leone, which struggles to achieve basic infrastructure in health, water, education, energy, housing. 2 greens, incidentally, SDG 12 and 13. We can have a look at it a bit more. So doing well in 2, and then a lot of issues in regard to the rest of them. Again, probably not unexpected. So the SDGs are a matrix, fabulous educational tool, fabulous information tool, but are they actually a metric for sustainable development? And Sierra Leone, again, a beautiful, beautiful country, but the big challenge in a country like Sierra Leone and many, many others is basically survival. It's not necessarily thriving, it's having enough basic infrastructure to meet the needs of the current. Ireland, incidentally, when some people ask, the report card for Ireland looks very similar to the top 10, 2 reds there. So the SDGs, very detailed, huge metric, huge amount of information. But here's the thing. What if every country in the world were to achieve them? Because that's the goal of the SDGs. That's the nature. I worked previously in Millennium Development Goals. They were for the poorest country in the world, but the SDGs was a big transformation in thinking. Well, tease this out. Let's approach this from a different angle. We're currently living in a climate emergency. The latest IPCC report from August 2021 really pulls no punches in this. We're also living in a biodiversity emergency, or some commentators call it the Great Extinction. The combination of those two is very clear in that the effect humans are having on the earth is pretty catastrophic across all sectors. And also now we're starting to see local effects having global effects. So wildfires, for example, in California, having tip-over effects on ecological systems in other parts of the planet. So we're starting to see this interconnectedness of the planet. And this is something that Joseph Rockstrom and his team published a seminal paper, and they called it Planetary Boundaries. And this is based on science, and it identifies 9 processes, interconnected systems that regulate the stability and resilience of the Earth. In other words, interactions between land, ocean, atmosphere, and life. Basically, the conditions which make the Earth habitable for us. And these planetary boundaries, the way to think of them is they're like a set of dominoes. When they're standing, they're stable, but if you push one, it has an effect on all of those surrounding it. And this effect is what's called tipping points. And a tipping point is basically a point beyond which the Earth cannot continue to exist in that state. It will change. How it changes, there's a lot of debate on it. So the challenge of all this, though, it's a big global discussion. And try, now that pubs are open again, try having a conversation about planetary boundaries and people walk away from you quite quickly. So I think we need to sometimes bring this down from global to a very local, personal level. So let's pick one, right? Let's pick something that is going to be very topical in the next few weeks in Ireland, carbon budgets or CO2 concentration. And I think it's pretty evident when you zoom out on a graph like this, you can see over a very short period of time the effect industrialization, the effect economies based on fossil fuel extraction and burning has on carbon emissions. And again, the thing I like to do is maybe bring it to more personal. Think in my lifetime, when I arrived on the planet to much fanfare, well, in my house anyway, in the 70s, we were below the planetary boundary. By the time Liverpool had won the last of their league titles in 2019 and I graduated, we'd increased 6%. By the time I'm living in Sierra Leone, 2010, we've increased that like 15%. Fast forward to now, so over a quarter, over 25% in half a lifetime. The planetary boundary for this was exceeded quite a long time ago. And it's pretty agreed that it was set at about 350 parts per million. So again, these are big things, hard to bring down. So Dan O'Neill and his team in the University of Leeds have done a lot of work on translating them into per capita or per person boundaries. And so the carbon budget that we can safely emit and use and stay within the planetary boundary is about 1.6 ton per person per year. So Dan and his team developed this other metric. And this is basically what you're looking at here is the planetary boundaries. Again, red is bad. And if you compare Finland and Ireland to the safe per capita boundary, you start to see something interesting develop. First of all, you see that the most sustainable countries in the world, according to the SDG index, are using resources at a level that's far beyond the ability of the Earth to sustain it. In fact, they're using it at 10 times or more the per capita boundary. And that brings this concept of, it's often described as a tree-earth lifestyle. So Finland, number 1 on the SDG index, would need the equivalent of 3 Earths to sustain this level of resource use. Or Ireland, for example, would need the equivalent of 4 Earths. But we've only got 1. And then compare a country like Sierra Leone, and it gets even more interesting because you start to see a country like Sierra Leone actually is well within the planetary boundary. In fact, it's 0.3 tons per person per year. So you start to see this whole thing gets like an onion. Once you start peeling it back, it gets even more complex. So let's maybe bring it to some kind of conclusion. So start off the question, can we have infinite growth on a finite planet? Well, we have an ecological ceiling. That ecological ceiling is the planetary boundaries. So the answer to that is most definitely no. And we thought we could, and economies are based on that assumption. It's not possible. Well, and those planetary boundaries exist, and this is what forms the outer ecological ceiling. Next question then. Well, what about all the countries that want to start to achieve the SDGs? Can we have development without borders? And in these countries, it's about meeting basic needs. It's about basically surviving or thriving. Basic needs in water, health, food, education. Things like, for example, a country like Sierra Leone is badly lacking. In fact, as Emma mentioned, for many countries, the SDGs are actually survival goals. So where all these tend to come together is what Kate Raworth, which is where this comes from, Donut Economics, she published a book and she called it this safe zone, where countries can meet all of their social needs, achieve the SDGs, but stay safely within the ecological ceiling. And this is where the drive is to get countries in this. So let's look at a couple of examples of countries who've achieved this. That's the end of that. There are none. There are no countries that have achieved a good life for all its citizens while staying safely within planetary boundaries. In fact, this is the actual sustainable development paradox in the whole discussion. because you have a country like Ireland, and we know there are tremendous inequalities in Ireland, but compared to a country like Sierra Leone, it has achieved a high level of social foundation. But the cost is it's using resources which are unsustainable. A country like Sierra Leone, on the other hand, is not using resources that are unsustainable, but hasn't met that need yet. So how does a country like Ireland safely come back into that safe space, and a country like Sierra Leone progress to achieve that safe space also? So there's a term now where the whole old-fashioned international development complex of developed and developing countries doesn't exist anymore, because every country is now a developing country. Because here's the thing, and this again to paraphrase Dan O'Neill and his team, it may be possible for everyone on the planet to achieve basic levels of services and live what he calls a good life, with access to education, water, health, and so on. It might even be possible for humans to live within their environmental means. But with the current systems we have, there's no way those things can happen at the same time. They're mutually exclusive. This drive for growth on which most Western economies are based, and the massive resource use that comes with it, is not sustainable. So all this that I'm describing here is what's called donut economics. And I would start to finish up this by saying, again, no disrespect to economists, but let's actually engage with this, you know, as a group. Why not donut engineering or donut architecture? You know, why not start to engage in how we can actually work in our own lives at getting into this zone and engage in the debate? It doesn't matter whether we're students, educators, government, community professionals. Basically, what we're now in the process is moving from these ideas to transformative actions. The problem is we're not set up for transformative actions. We don't like it. We don't like change. So let me just finish with a couple of very quick examples and I'll wrap up. This grainy picture from the 80s and 90s is what I learned to do as an engineer: build in nature, develop a system, put it in nature, and then evaluate what damage I'd done. Hopefully not much. We need to move now to building nature in, to developing solutions that use natural processes or hybrid systems. We do a lot of work on this around Europe on nature-based solutions. You know, for example, what you're looking at here from one of our partners in the Netherlands, like Iselmer, is a wastewater treatment plant, a water treatment plant, a flood storage facility, also an ecosystem in itself. It's a national park. This is an example of changing how we think about infrastructure provision. And again, just a quick add, we have developed a nature-based solutions toolkit to work with students and professionals on how to bring about this change. We'll be launching that shortly in November. We'll come back to you on that. But the other couple of quick things, and unconscious time is moving, is we need to change our thinking. And I talk about engineers, particularly, and architects, is the community is not external. They're not a consumer or customer. They're actually part of the design, construction, finance, and operation and maintenance team. Quick example from Egg, which we worked in some years ago in our Hebrides. Egg wasn't connected to the mainland, so they needed to develop their own electrical grid. They were told for many years that they could either have wind or solar or hydro, but not all. The community decided no, that will cause inequality in the island. So what was developed was the first integrated grid, self-run, self-managed, of hydro, of solar, of wind. The traffic light you see up here is on the local pub. There's only one pub on the island, and it's red and green. On days like today, where it's quite cloudy, you have a red light, which means conserve energy. Don't switch on the washing machine, don't switch on the dishwasher. If we have green, we can use resources. So again, it's moving away from large centralized supply systems to a model of self-supply. Now, this was by necessity, but these are the kind of discussions I think we need to start progressing. And for low-income countries, you know, this concept of self-supply, this is Bolivia, where we worked with a partner. And this is with the local campesinos. Here, it's about developing high-tech solutions that are low cost. It's not low tech, it's high tech, that actually give people the ability to afford, operate, and maintain their own water treatment systems, their own rainwater harvesting systems, like this chap is developing here. So To finish off then, a couple of quick takeaways just from my experience, and maybe I think what's important is the SDGs, are they development goals or are they survival goals? The SDG is not the only development matrix. We need to balance that with an understanding of planetary boundaries and that concept that there are limits to what we can do, how we can do it. A lot of talk now, you'll hear it again in Ireland over the next few weeks with carbon budgets coming out. But here's the thing I've learned in international development. Behavior change is driven by emotion, not logic. So if we want to target change, we need to, and engineers think logically. That's our drawback. And we also need to understand that communities are part of the solution. So we need to integrate centralized and decentralized infrastructure. And there's massive challenges to that. I appreciate that. But the last thing I'll say is, and this ever more is getting pressing, this is our decision. We either do one of three things. We either pull the ladder up, in other words, we conserve what we have, and we continue to use resources at an unsustainable way, but we sustain our lifestyles in that bracket. We have business as usual, so we announce carbon taxes and we tinker about the edges, but we don't really change a huge amount. Or we radically change, we converge. We move in top of the SDG tree to using resources at a sustainable way, while also allowing low-income countries to develop a sustainable basic level. Because the question I started with, reimagining sustainable development, well, this in 2021, this is the ultimate question. Is it really possible to have enough for all forever? I think it probably is, but I think it's fast running out unless we have radical change. So hopefully this webinar series is the start of an engagement with you guys. We're going to have lots of different examples from around the world. If any of you have examples out there that you'd like to showcase, we'd be delighted to hear from you. We'll have a second webinar series after Christmas, and we'll also hopefully be hosting some in-person workshops, debates around different areas. So thanks for listening to the rambling. I've kept you just 4 minutes past your lunchtime, so hope you found it. I won't ask you which of those engage, inform, annoy that you found at the start. So thanks very much, Emma. I'll hand back to you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Liam. Well, guys, for everyone who's still listening, actually, it's great to see that that we still have pretty much everyone there. I just wanted to open the floor now to you guys. If you have questions or comments or stories that you might like to share, kind of linking to, or indeed not linking perhaps to what Liam has said. But yeah, just wanted to open the floor now for a brief Q&A before we wrap up in conversation. So over to you guys if you have any comments. Feel free to obviously jump onto video and both audio if you want to ask your question, or if you want to pop it in the chat, I can read it out, no problem. A lot to digest, I know, and metaphorically digest on a Wednesday lunchtime. But yeah, any comments or questions, guys? So we have one in the chat here. Sierra Leone's 2 greens were the only 2 red on Finland's on the SDG report card. Is that the general trend? It costs the environment for a country to do well.
Hey, Paul, why did you ask a hard question? Yeah, I mean, for example, I'm also the chair of the Environmental Science Association, and we had Kate Roward to do, and I put the link in on the slide, and she talks a lot about this link between economic development and growth and resource use. And the short answer is, if you look at the trends, our Western model is built on growth. And you even see the challenges when we don't grow, or if growth becomes negative. There's a massive government stimulus, but that comes at a cost. So yeah, in short, if you look across, any of the countries, you will find that link between growth and resource use. And there's lots of, again, when you look at different commentators, there's some, for example, who think that the Green New Deal, where you can decouple growth by turning towards renewables, or the concept of degrowth also. But the big and maybe that's possible. I have some doubts, but maybe it's possible. But the challenge is we also need to go backwards. So you're going to see, for example, New Zealand is one of the few countries that has developed, and if you look at those as an example, they've adopted the planetary boundaries as their growth developing strategy. And they very clearly show across each planetary boundary where they are, where the country is, and where they need to go. So the problem is we need to break the cycle, but we also need to go backwards. And that's what you're going to see in the next few weeks with the carbon budgets. It's going to get very real for a lot of businesses, you know, in terms of, again, if it's adopted seriously, where there's carbon budgets brought in for everything. And it's that concept of trying to stay within those limits. Thinking sideways works. Thinking sideways is borrowed. I have to say, he used to sponsor a guy called Jerry Tobin, I don't think he'll mind me, used to one of the directors in Davies. And this was his time, whenever he hired a young engineer, he used to say to me, I want someone who can think sideways. In other words, I don't want someone who's blinkered. I want someone to see around the corners. And I suppose one of the things that where there is no engineer, we're trying to work with the colleges is exactly that. In engineering, we kind of think there's one solution or a best solution or preferred solution, but trying to, from first years right through to final years, to actually figure out there's actually lots of many solutions, and it's that process, and that's kind of, I suppose, the thinking sideways. The rest of the dates, Emma, I think.
Yeah, I'm just going to drop in. Yeah, they are. I'm just going to drop in the link for the registration for the remainder of the webinars. Just needed to have 2 links actually, because we're going to be running them every 2 weeks from next week, but we'll have one next week. But yeah, all our and
maybe next week, Emma, you can maybe who's next week?
Yeah, absolutely, exactly. Yeah, we've got Cathal O'Mara next week from Cathal O'Mara Landscape Architects, and he's going to be talking about his topic that they touched on, the master plan network for bicycle paths in Guatemala City. So promises to be really interesting. It's definitely, from chatting to Cathal, I had a fascinating conversation with him a few weeks back. It's definitely going to be about a lot more than just bicycles and creating bicycle tracks. So yeah, hopefully it's going to be really interesting for you guys, in particular any designers and urban designers that we might have on the call. So yeah, the same time next week.
Just to add to Emma, I mean, again, we'd love to, if any of you, again, you can email me or email Emma or get on to EWB. But if any of you have ideas, I'm conscious some of you might be joining from Engineers Ireland conferences on today. But if any of you have ideas, maybe in your region, maybe in your firm, on how we can create this discussion, because I think that's the idea, whole idea behind it is to engage. And again, like, when's the last time you heard kind of or saw an engineer really leading the discussion on this? You know, we're normally on trying to defend what went wrong. It's the only time I see engineers, you know. So we'd love to, if any of you have ideas. So this is part of a program sponsored by Irish Aid. So yeah, so if any of you guys have ideas for events or how to continue discussions in your own area, please, we'd love to hear from you. Or indeed, if you'd like to showcase anything through the webinar series, be delighted to hear from you and maybe organize something together. So conscious of time, Emma, so maybe we might start to wrap up, or?
Absolutely, yeah, I think so. Unless if there's any last question or comments before we finish up, guys. If not, we'll let you off to enjoy the rest of your day. No, looks good. Okay, cool. Thanks very much then, guys. And we'll be back, as I say, next week, next Wednesday again, also 1:30 Irish time. Liam shared a video there.
It's the social commentators of our time.
Social commentators, yeah.
I'm conscious when I talk to students, yeah, they look at me as if I've 6 heads. So.
yeah.
Something to check in after the webinar.
Our wise commentators, can learn a lot from them.
So thanks Emma for inviting me, and thanks everyone. Like I said, hope some of you found it interesting, and look forward to maybe kicking on with a bit of debate in future. Cheers.
Yeah. Great. Thanks a million, guys. And see those of you next week who can make it for the chat with Cathal O'Mara. Okay, take care, guys. Enjoy the rest of the day.